Welcome to One Chapter, One Thought. I'm Pastor Chris from Lincroft Bible Church in New Jersey, and every weekday I read one chapter of the New Testament and offer one brief devotional thought. Today's reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, all that they tell you to do, do it and observe it. But do not do according to their deeds, for they say things and do not do them. They tie up heavy burdens and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to move them with so much as a finger. But they do all their deeds to be noticed by men, for they broaden their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels of their garments. They love the place of honor at banquets and the chief seats in the synagogues, and respectful greetings in the marketplaces and being called rabbi by men. But do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, and you are all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Do not be called leaders, for one is your leader, that is Christ. But the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from people, for you do not enter in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the offering on it, he is obligated. You blind men, what is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar swears both by the altar and everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears both by the temple and by him who dwells within it. And whoever swears by heaven swears both by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, but have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others, you blind guides who strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you, too, outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves, that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the guilt of your fathers. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how will you escape the sentence of hell? Therefore, behold, I am sending you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Some you will scourge in your synagogues and will persecute from city to city, so that upon you may fall the guilt of the righteous blood shed on earth, the blood of the righteous Abel, to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were unwilling. Behold, your house is being left to you desolate. For I say to you, from now on, you will not see me until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. One thought. Jesus is very hard on hypocrisy. But hypocrisy isn't just about feelings. Sometimes we may think in our faith, well, I don't really feel like going to church. Maybe that would make me a hypocrite. Or I don't really feel like reading the Bible. And because I'm not feeling a certain way, I don't want to just, quote unquote, go through the motions, because that would be hypocrisy. But Jesus actually defines hypocrisy pretty well for us here, particularly in verse 3. He says, "Do not do according to their deeds," meaning the Pharisees' deeds, the way that they live their lives, "for they say things, but they do not do them." So hypocrisy is really saying one thing, but doing another. So it's maybe saying how important justice might be, but then living an unjust life. In context, it's saying that you love God, but then the Pharisees were living for the praise of people. In verses 5 and 6, it says they do all their deeds to be noticed by men. So that's hypocrisy. They're saying how much they love God, but actually what they're doing and how they live, they're really loving the praise of men. How they live, what they say, there's a disconnect by coming up with elaborate phrases to get out of keeping their word. Isn't that such an interesting thing that Jesus spends all of this time about where to swear an oath? Is it the temple? Is it the gold? Is it the offering? Is it the altar? He spends quite a bit of time talking about that, why we shouldn't do that, or why it doesn't really matter. Why was Jesus doing that? It's because in those days there was all these elaborate, ways to swear an oath or devote, money or our time or whatever. And they created these things in order to create loopholes to get out of fulfilling basic obligations. So they were focused on religious minutiae in other instances too, right? You tithe mint and dill and cumin, but then they don't focus on living a just life. They neglect the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. They're presenting themselves as morally clean, but they're acting corruptly. That is hypocrisy. And he tells his followers to learn from these. I've heard it said before, it's a cliche, right? Anyone can be an example, even a bad example. So Jesus is pointing to the Pharisees and saying this is a bad example to learn from. Jesus warns his followers to avoid the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. And his broader point still stands for us. We must have our conduct match up with our words. We need to walk the talk. It's a cliche, so easy to say, much harder to do, but that's what Jesus requires of us. So we should ask ourselves, where in my life do I say one thing, but then do another? Where in my life are there pockets of hypocrisy? Ask the Holy Spirit in prayer to root out the hypocrisy in your life so that you can walk in the truth.